Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask Our Experts. I'm Sean Strathy with Magic EdTech. And today we're actually going outside of the magic realm and we're inviting somebody from a former associate of mine, a longtime friend, Liz Lee from the ISTE organization. Hi, Liz, how are you?
Hey, Sean, how's it going? I'm doing well.
I'm doing great, thanks. So for those of you who don't know, for those of us who don't know, can you share with us a little bit about what ISTE is?
Sure. So ISTE is the International Society for Technology in Education. We're a nonprofit that's been around for over 40 years now. And our general goal and mission is to help educators accelerate innovation in schools. And so we do that through a couple different routes. We're probably best known for our annual conference, which is the biggest EdTech conference in the world, I believe. Typically happens every summer. And then last year we switched to virtual, and we'll be doing it again virtual at the end of June this year, where we just bring together, 10 to 15,000 educators from around the world, EdTech companies. There's lots of learning and excitement and sessions going on and demos and everything like that.
I've been, it's a lot of fun.
It is pretty fun if you do get to go. The other thing we're probably best known for is our ISTE standards, which are frameworks for what teaching and learning should look like in kind of an increasingly digital and increasingly global world. And that's sort of what all of our professional development products and offerings are all built around, those ISTE standards, including ISTE U, which I know we're going to talk more about today.
Yeah, so Liz, you're the director of ISTE U. Can you share with us a little bit about what ISTE U is?
Sure. So ISTE U is a program that launched a couple years back when we were, trying to take all the learning and excitement that happens at the conference and figure out a way to reach more educators around the world year-round, not just for those, condensed 4 days. And so it's a series of online courses that educators can take in a number of different topics, including, more content-related topics like artificial intelligence, computational thinking, digital citizenship, and also more, strategy-related topics like how to incorporate project-based learning in your classrooms or game-based learning. And then last year, when schools started closing, we really started shifting toward focusing on teaching online and what are sort of best practices and instructional strategies that any teacher could find useful when teaching in an online or blended setting.
Yeah, and I know a lot of teachers are still struggling with that even a year into the adjustment. But, with your experience, what are the areas in which teachers need the most support and training right now?
It's definitely shifted a lot over, the past year. If we've seen it at the beginning, it was definitely a big rush for, okay, how do we use these tools or get these tools and devices and connectivity into students' hands? So, rolling out one-to-one programs and everything like that, and just teachers who, the majority of which had never or maybe had very lightly used technology before, were kind of diving in headfirst into using tools for the first time to teach. And then I think over last summer and over the course of this school year, what we're seeing is that shift to more focusing on how can technology support me and my instructional goals. We know that you can't just take a face-to-face lesson and simply do the same thing in an online environment. It just doesn't work that well for students. And so in addition to learning how to actually use tools, in every district, every school uses different tools and different devices, how can we actually shift the way we're designing instruction to best meet students' needs? And that's where we see is the greatest area of need for professional development, and where organizations like ISTE or others can, come in with resources to help prepare teachers.
That's really awesome. The that whole mindset of shifting from in classroom instruction where you have the kids contained into a physical space, replicating that on Zoom doesn't accomplish the same goals always, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same debate that we've been seeing with technology from the beginning, right? Like giving students a digital worksheet is fine. It's more efficient in some ways, but it's still in the area where you're just substituting technology for what you can do without technology, as opposed to really taking advantage of all that technology allows you to do, which can be, maybe have a larger learning curve or a steeper learning curve for those who didn't grow up learning in that way. But there's so much room for innovation and collaboration and having students be creators and active learners instead of, passive learners. So that's what gets us excited and where we hope that we can see a shift now and going forward. And now that, we've had this huge boom of technology available and we've been forced to try all these different models and strategies, how can we, still continue that even if and when students are back in face-to-face classrooms?
I didn't even think about this, but I remember, a few years ago, like teachers who were flipping the classroom, it was like, wow, they're super innovative. And I guess this has really forced everybody to kind of flip the classroom around.
Right. Like we've all been now in a situation where you could not sit in front of your students for 6 hours a day, working with them in a synchronous way. And we've been forced to try other models. And even when we can bring students back to face-to-face, like there are definitely some takeaways that can still be applicable based on how we know students learn best. Breaking into small groups and doing different stations, and the flipped model, as you mentioned, is super valuable, where the teacher doesn't have to be the holder of all the information anymore, because there's a whole world of information that's accessible through technology. I know that's a theme we hear over and over, just how the role of the teacher can really shift from being, the provider of information to the guide for students to, work their way through the information themselves.
That's a really good position to or point to transition to our next topic, is the role of teachers. One of the topics that keeps coming up in every conversation I'm having, whether I'm talking to administrators, teachers, EdTech companies, publishers, is this idea of equity. It's a big topic right now. Can you share in your mind what role teachers can play to help overcome equity challenges?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Very important. There are so many levels to that question. As you mentioned, you've heard it from many different roles, because it's a topic everyone should be focusing on, and there needs to be structures put in place, at the national level, state level, district level to, ensure equity in some ways. But there are things that we think that teachers can do, even if there are other aspects that might be out of their control. So one of those is just really taking the time to understand who your students are and what their environments might look like, and what their experiences might look like when it comes to learning online. It's definitely something that teachers already do at the beginning of each school year. You try to get to know your students, and that's a huge part of the learning dynamic. But it can be totally different in online learning settings. Different groups of students can be more adversely impacted by online school than others. Such as students with special needs who have extra help in the classroom with them, or have an IEP, or are differentiated in some ways in the way they're learning. It can be more difficult for a teacher who's new to teaching online to understand how to tailor their lesson to that student, or to make sure that they're included along the learning path. English language learners is another example where it can be more difficult in remote classrooms to get the message across in a way that's students can understand and understand what steps they need to take going forward. And then also early childhood, like younger students, just with, first of all, developing language abilities, and also abilities to use devices and actually be independent, going through content on their own. There can be a huge range with that. So, we recommend that one thing teachers can do is go through an activity where they create identity maps for their students, almost creating like personas to understand all these different factors that are coming into play, because it can trigger realizations about the way they were doing something before that they could be doing differently to be more inclusive of all students.